My name is Liz Holtzman. I want to thank you, Senator, for your very thoughtful comments. I guess my question really reverts to how is your vision going to be realized? Because it seems to me that the U.S. right now is a puppet on the string of Saudi Arabia. Yemen is one example, but look at what's happening in Syria. The Saudis don't want their people to show up at the peace conference, and we just throw up our hands. And so I don't understand. I mean, I wish it could happen, because I think it's been a very nefarious influence. But how is it going to happen? I mean, first, I guess the government has to, the administration has to change its own attitude. But what power do we have really to change Saudi behavior here?
So the short answer is I don't know. I say that sincerely in the sense that I wanted to open up this line of argument here and then develop it in Washington over the course of the next few months, because I think I will have others who will join me, and I think that's the first step. I mean, frankly, there has been no transparent, open acknowledgement of this problem. Every speech about the Middle East includes sort of a one-off line recognizing this issue, but no one's really drilled down on it. So my hope is that the first step in changing practice, changing behavior and strategy is a much more open discussion, which maybe the work that I'll do will cause. But then I'm trying to constantly undercut myself here, but let me acknowledge another weakness of my argument, which is the fight that is real within Saudi Arabia itself for the future of the Saud family and their control over the country. And so I think there will be an element of very smart people in New York and Washington and other places who will say, be careful what you wish for. If you want to get harder, take a harder and tougher line with the Saudis, and that ultimately results in the family losing power, you may not be happy with what replaces it. And you think the Wahhabis are strong now. Imagine a scenario in which they are openly running the government rather than just being the benefactor of oil money that's funneled through them. And so there is something very powerful happening within Saudi Arabia now. There is a coterie of young people that are going to have their say ultimately in the future of that country. And so that does argue for being somewhat careful and nuanced in the arguments that I'm suggesting we be louder about, so as to not provide impetus for the tumult before we're all ready for it.
In the be careful what you wish for category, the mention of the militias supported by the Saudis in Syria, you were regretting that Saudi Arabia was not more engaged in the Syrian fight. Is there a way that they could be a little too engaged with the wrong people, with forces that might not be so different from Al-Qaeda or ultimately ISIS?
Well, so I one of the first things I did when I got to the Senate was I wrote legislation with Tom Udall and Rand Paul and Mike Lee banning the use of U.S. dollars to fund and train the so-called vetted Syrian moderate opposition, in part because I had seen what had already happened, that our friends who told us that they were working with moderates inside Syria were not working with moderates, and there was no way to untangle the good guys from the kind of bad guys and the really bad guys. I think that is such a fine line to walk that it is impossible for us to ultimately do it. So yes, I think that's part of our conversation with them. But I think right now, my chief concern is that we not ourselves get in that business too deep, because if the Saudis are bad at it, we'll be even worse at it. We don't have the expertise on the ground.
That's good.